So I hope everybody's doing well this morning. I'm going to speak from the book of Genesis. Brother Chris has kind of been taking us through there, but I'm going to skip ahead. I'll tell you where I'm going to come from, and I'll get there in a minute. Genesis 41, verses 37 through 52. Seems like a lot, but I'll read fast, I promise. I've told you all about somebody that discipled me, my life, Dr. Cecil. And he told me the first time I spoke, he gave me some advice, and I never have forgot it. I try to keep it wrote down. And he said to pray up before you ever speak. And so I prayed up. He said to study up. And so I've tried to study up. He said to stand up, and here I am. He said to speak up. And then he said to shut up. So I'm sure that may be the point some of you all are looking for, but I got to go through the other steps first. But if I had to call this sermon something, it'd be Joseph's story, the moral of the story. And I borrowed a lot of this from Vody Bauckham. If you want to hear a really good speaker speak on it, look him up on YouTube. But it's the story of Joseph. And you know, I'd spoke on Joseph before and God's providence and how God used people in Joseph's life. And most of the time when I've heard Joseph talk about it, it's about, you know, if you follow God and you're faithful through the good things and the bad things, you know, God's providence, you know, Jacob sent Joseph out to look for his brothers. He didn't know where he was, and he sent him out. And he come across a man, and the man said, I think they said they were going over yonder. I don't think that's really what he said, over yonder, but close. But there was the man, and so there went Joseph. And as he crossed over there, he found his brothers. Now, you know, Joseph had had some dreams, and his brothers weren't real fond of him. If you all know the story of Joseph, he had a color of many coats his dad had given him. So he kind of stood out. And the other brothers didn't like him. So they decided they'd kill him. But in God's providence, one brother said, no, let's not kill him. And along comes a tribe looking for slaves. God's providence. And so they sold him into slavery. He ends up in prison, falsely accused. God's providence. And there he translates some dreams. And through that, he goes to Pharaoh's house, and he becomes second in control of all of Egypt. God's providence again. But when we tell that story, sometimes it's just like us to make it worldly. That, you know, just look. Look at where Joseph ended up. He went through all that stuff, but he was a rich man. He ended up rich. He had the power, his second in command. People in Egypt would bow before him. But that's not the moral of the story. And I missed it. I completely missed it. Joseph's faithfulness is most of the time the whole story. Egypt's the most powerful nation in that time, and he became number 2 in that nation, like I said. He was faithful to his brothers, selling him into slavery. Would we be that faithful to them if they did that to us? Faithful unto present, faithful in a strange land, and God blessed him. But have we missed something in that? What is the real point of Joseph's story? It's a great story, but let's look at it this morning with a fresh set of eyes. As you look at the book of Genesis, there is a number of ways you can divide it up. One way is to divide it into scenes. There are 11 times there that are generations of people discussed. And I know how we love to read the generations. Somebody begot somebody, but 11 times in Genesis it's discussed. The last scene, Genesis 37, verse 2, the generations of Jacob is discussed. You see, the story of Joseph is not about Joseph, it's about Jacob. The second way you can look at the book of Genesis is by reoccurring themes. There are 3 themes that reoccur. It's land, seed, and a covenant. God creates the land and then the seed. And then through men, he creates a covenant. Then through man's fall, we see man get kicked out of the garden. And through this, we see a covenant with man. In that covenant, there is a promised seed. In Genesis chapter 12, Abraham, who is still Abram, there's a covenant that God was going to make. And it was going to make you a nation, which is a seed, and going to give you a land, which is a covenant. So, as we look at this, we see that then this promised seed seems to move to the promised land. That is theirs by covenant. We have land, seed, and covenant again. Now let's read this story again, and before we read it, there's 3 sets of dreams in Joseph's life, like I told y'all. First, there's the pair of dreams he has that he shares with his brothers. It doesn't go so well. In the dreams, he told his brothers that they would bow down to him. And they were older than him. And in that day, that wasn't the way things went. And so they didn't like it. His brothers hate him because of it and his favored status with their father. So they decide they're going to kill him. But they don't. Instead, they sell him into slavery because of the dreams. Second dream was when he is in prison after he was falsely accused. And there was 2 servants of the king, and he interprets their dreams. And through that, his name gets out. In the third set of dreams, then Pharaoh has 2 dreams, and he cannot interpret them. And the king's servant remembers Joseph interprets dreams. In Genesis 41, that's where it picks up, the sick cows and the healthy cows, 7 years of famine, so you store up seed for the famine. So let's pick up in Genesis 41, verse 37. Let's read it with a fresh set of eyes, like we've never heard this story before. Think about the irony that Moses is pointing out in writing this. I'll try to read quickly. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find anyone like this, a man who has the Spirit of God in him?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as intelligent and as wise as you. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only with regard to the throne will I be greater than you." Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "See, I am placing you over all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him in fine linen garments, placed a gold chain around his neck. He had Joseph ride in a second chariot, which was a big deal. And servants called out before him, "Aproach." So he placed him over all of the land in Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your permission, no one will be able to raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephanath-Paneah. Let's go with that, whether it's right or not. And gave him a wife, Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the services of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced outstanding harvest. Joseph gathered all the excess food in the land of Egypt during the 7 years and placed it in the cities. He placed the food in every city from the fields around it. So Joseph stored up grain in such abundance, like the sand of the sea, that he stopped measuring it because it was beyond measure. 2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of famine arrived. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore him them. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh. Now these are Hebrew names. They gave him an Egyptian name. Pharaoh did. But he was able to name his sons Hebrew names. And so the firstborn was Manasseh. And the meaning of that is, God has made me forget all our hardship in my father's house. Folks, have we done that? Have you forgot all your hardships that you've went through where you're at now in God's house? And the second son he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Doesn't sound like Joseph thinks he's all that. Doesn't sound like he thinks he's the number 2 in all the land. Doesn't sound like he's enjoying the wealth. He calls it the land of my affliction. And yet there he is. Then the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end. And the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in every country, but throughout the land of Egypt there was food. Extreme hunger came to all the land of Egypt, and the people cried out to Pharaoh for food. Pharaoh told all of Egypt, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." Because the famine had spread across the whole country, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. The whole world came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, for the famine was severe all over the earth. So as we look at that, we see in the verse 37 and 38, it's kind of ironic that Pharaoh honors Joseph's position with God. This is an Egyptian, while his brothers hated him because of the word that came from him. Sometimes we might be like that. We like people's words. We honor them, but they're not godly words. And yet a pagan king does. That's a problem, that a pagan king recognizes this. Verse 39, Pharaoh thinks that he is a god. Verse 40, you should be over my house. Every house Joseph serves prospers, if you go through this story. This story starts in chapter 39, and it goes through chapter 47 in Genesis. I was going to read that when Michelle said it would be a good idea. So you sometime go back and read the whole story. You should be over my house. Every house Joseph serves prospers. Whose house is Joseph supposed to be prospering? Jacob's. That's the house he's supposed to be in. So when we read, you should be over my house, what we should see is it's the wrong house. He's supposed to be in Jacob's house, and yet he's in Pharaoh's house. This is not a good thing either. And you know, when I studied this and came across Joseph, every house Joseph serves prospers, I asked myself, you know, I've served a lot of things and done stuff. Has every house that you've served prospered? Has everywhere you've been prospered? Because, you know, God calls us to be his light in a dying world, and we should shine no matter where we're at. Verse 41, Pharaoh says, I have set you over all things of the land, seed, and covenant. What land is Joseph supposed to be in? He's supposed to be in Canaan, but he's in Egypt. The land that was promised is Canaan. Egypt is the theological opposite of Canaan. Wrong house, wrong land. You think Moses is trying to say this is a good thing? Verse 42, then Pharaoh took his signet ring and dressed him up. That's a big deal when Pharaoh takes his signet ring off and gives it to him. It's a wrong robe. He dressed him in clothes. Remember, he had the coat of many colors. Now he's wearing Egyptian's clothes. It's the wrong robe. How was Joseph identified at the beginning of the story? It's by the robe that his father had given him. Wrong house, the wrong land, and the wrong robe. And essentially, the wrong father, because he's under Pharaoh. Again, this isn't good. So how can we say, as we read this, that Moses is saying this is a blessing? You see how we turn things around? We have enough of the world in us. It's like poor guy gets knocked down. It's like a movie, and he comes up from the bottom. And we want the little guy to be big. We want him to be rich. We want him, that's the world. That's not the way God operates all the time. And he made him ride in the second chariot, verse 43. And they called out, bow before him. That's another irony, that his brothers wanted to kill him because of his dream, that they would now have to bow down to him. But the pagan king says to bow down to him, and the Egyptians don't. That seems a little ironic. Verse 44 and 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph by name, Zaphnath-Paneah. It's the wrong name. Joseph was his Egyptian name. Joseph was his Hebrew name. It's the wrong name. He has a covenant name that identifies him with the covenant people, and Pharaoh changed that. Moses is not saying this is good. And Pharaoh gave him the daughter of Pharaoh, priest of On. Wrong wife. Wrong belief. It was a pagan wife. Not only is she a pagan, she's the daughter of a pagan priest. I doubt they were equally yoked. And that's important. Let's skip to verse 49 now. The sand of the sea. When God made the promise to Abraham, he said they would be like the sand of the sea. There's a point being made there in verse 49. Verse 51 and 52, the verses make a good point. Joseph gave his sons Hebrew names, not Egyptian ones. Covenant names, names from his home. Seed, land, and covenant. Joseph is identifying with the covenant. He's identifying with the word. Manasseh, I let that go. Have you let things go in your life? When you're serving God, you've got to let certain things go. You can't harp on them. Dr. Cecil told me one time he had a scar on his, this isn't in my notes, this is just extra. He had a scar on his finger. He was a kid and he went down and there was an axe where they chopped wood and he was messing with the axe and cut his finger. And he held up his hand and he said, "You see that scar?" He said, that's an old wound. But if I would have been picking on it ever since I was a kid, it would have never healed. And it'd still be a fresh injury. Sometimes that's what we do. Let it go. Let it heal. Let it be a reminder of maybe something bad, but let it just be an old wound. So he names his second son Ephraim. Means fruitful in the land of my affliction. That's the name I'd want. Oh, here comes old fruitful in the land of affliction. But to society, it looks like he has it so good. He's got money. He's over all the land. People are bowing down to him. And he calls it the land of his affliction. You would think that the other land where he was sold into slavery would be, but it was not, because he was part of the covenant. You see, sometimes what the world has us chase, the American dream, isn't what God would have us chase. We should be looking for a land beyond here. It's in our house. And you know, sometimes it's hard to believe that when you watch TV and read YouTube and all the stuff going on Facebook. We get confused and chasing things down here. But you know, we weren't meant to be happy here, because this isn't our home. We're passing through here to a better place. Try to keep that in mind. This is not our home. But even though Joseph was living in this place of affliction, he was doing everything he could to be a blessing in the land, because this is where God has him at this time. Folks, are you not happy where you're at? I've been not happy where I've been at before. But you know, if you're one of his, he's got you there for a reason. Are you happy in your land of affliction? Are you serving others in your land of affliction this morning? That's what he's calling us to do. Are we doing this? That's part of the story. Joseph was not saying, "I wish my brother could see me now." What was that old country song a few years ago? If you could see me now. See, that's the way the world is when we attain things. Look at me now. I've made it to the big time. No, he knows this is not his home. He's very aware of it. If being a faithful servant and God will bless you is not the point, then what is the point? What's the point if we don't get blessed for being a faithful servant? So we're now getting to the point of the story of Joseph. we get to chapter 45, Joseph's brothers have run out of food because of the famine, and they hear there's food in Egypt. So they come to get some. Guess what? Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. They've forgotten about him. They think he's long gone. He hasn't forgotten about them. So Joseph begins to test his brothers. The first test is tied to the very reason that Joseph was sold into slavery, that his brothers hated him because he was the son of the wife Jacob loved. There's more than one wife involved here, and that's another sermon for another time. That is what made him the favorite son, because he was born to the favorite wife. Jacob was a terrible father and was open about his favoritism towards Joseph, which made the other brothers dislike him. But there was one more son born to the favorite wife. His name was Benjamin. When the brothers show up, Benjamin's not with them. Everybody but Benjamin. So Joseph has no idea if they've done away with him just like they did himself. He doesn't know if Benjamin's alive or where he's at. So he tests them. He tells them that they need to bring all the brothers, and also test them by keeping one of the brothers to see if they're going to abandon him. And then there is the final test. He plants the goods in their bags and takes Benjamin when they bring him back. It says, this one is going to jail. Y'all can leave. He's staying. And in this final test, one of the brothers distinguishes himself from the others by saying, take me instead of him. Now hold on to that and listen to Joseph's interpretation of these events. In verse 4, he reveals himself to them. His brothers are in shock and afraid. I imagine I might have been too if I sold him into slavery. He said, God sent me before you. Joseph says, God sent me here to save you. You see, it really wasn't about all those blessings, was it? It's just about the seed, the land, and the covenant. So if we go back in Genesis all the way to chapter 3, you don't have to look there. You just have to trust me. Check me later. The fall happens in chapter 3. Then there is a covenant promise, and the promise comes in the form of a curse to the serpent. I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. You're going to bruise his heel, and he's going to bruise your head. God makes this promise, and there is one who is coming that's going to undo this curse. In the next chapter, the first murder. The seed of the serpent, Cain, kills the seed of the woman, Abel. Why is the seed of Cain the one of the serpent? Because John says in 1 John 3:12, do not be like Cain, who was of the evil one. Now we got a problem, because now it looks like the promised seed has been murdered. But that's all right, because right after that, we're introduced to Seth. And then in chapter 5, there are 10 generations between Adam and Noah through the godly line of Seth. The promised seed has been preserved. Now Noah has 3 sons, but only one can be the promised seed. And eventually we find out it's Shem, who is the promised seed. Eventually we come to Abram, who is the promised seed. And then Abraham has 2 sons, but only one of them can be the promised seed. But interestingly enough, his wife is beyond the seed-bearing years. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But miraculously, he still gets the promised seed. It is Isaac. And with Isaac, there are twins that come. Which one's going to be the promised seed? Is it the firstborn, like the tradition says? No, it's not. It's a secondborn. Who is the promised seed? It is Jacob. And now with Jacob there's 12 sons. So which one is the promised seed? We don't know, but it seems like the story focuses on Joseph. It seems that way, so we might assume he's the promised seed. But it's not him. It's not Joseph. Joseph is just there for one reason in this story. Joseph is there so the promised seed doesn't starve to death. That was his purpose. It wasn't for the blessings. It wasn't for the notoriety. It was to save the promised seed. Who is the promised seed? Well, he identifies himself just before Joseph identifies himself to his brothers. And the way the promised seed identifies himself is very telling as to why he's the promised seed. Benjamin is about to be kept behind. But one brother steps up. Judah. Judah is the promised seed. He says to Joseph, "It will kill my father if he stays." So Judah offers himself as a substitute in the place of one his father's love, which is exactly what a future promised seed would do. Just like another promised seed, Judah has another son who identifies himself as a promised seed. You see, Judah's greater son, David, actually identifies himself as the seed with the giant to represent Israel. There's a greater David who identifies himself as the promised seed to which all other promised seeds point. He does what Judah and David did all in one act. He offers himself as a sacrifice, dying on a cross. You see, Joseph did not go to Egypt so he could tell everyone to be faithful and you will be rich and famous. That wasn't the reason. Joseph went to Egypt so that the promised seed would not starve, so that David would be born, so that Jesus could save his people. That is the point of the story of Joseph. It really has nothing to do with the blessings. It's the heart of the gospel and God's providence. God uses everything for you if you are his. Everything. You're going through things so he can save us and deliver us from our land of affliction. This is not our home. God always saves his people. It's in the book. You know, last Sunday we celebrated 72 years of Sharp Missionary Baptist Church. It's kind of cool to find out that that garage out there was where it started. But just like the story of Joseph, it's never been about Sharp Missionary Baptist Church. Never has, never will be. It's about God. It's about Jesus Christ. You know, it wasn't about Sharp Missionary Baptist Church when it was in that garage. It wasn't about the church when it moved to the building. It wasn't when it built this new sanctuary. It wasn't about it when it built the Family Life Center. Never was. It's about God. That's the reason for Sharp Missionary Baptist Church. And that's where we need to focus. In Acts 17, verse 24, it's King James Version, says, "God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands." Folks, he's not here when we leave. He leaves with us. If you're one of his, he's in your heart. When we get up and leave, this is just a building. Don't forget that. It's not about us, and it never has been. It's about God. So I'm about done. We might be a little late, but I'm going to blame it on Ryan singing along. I'm just teasing. You know, I've shared with y'all different times about some things I like and some things I don't. And you know, this sometimes isn't comfortable when you're standing up here. I look out there and all y'all sitting in comfortable chairs or pews, and y'all sitting in the exact same place every week. And you know, I've brought it up before about if I could do something, I would take these pews out and I'd put chairs. And the reason I would do that is so that when I come up here, Chris comes up here, and I'm a little uncomfortable, why not you be uncomfortable? Doesn't seem fair that I'm the only one. And so ever so often when I had the chairs out there, I'd move them around just so you couldn't sit in the same place every time. Just to mess with you. Just to see what it'd be like to be in the land of affliction. Amen? So now that Chris is gone, I took a chance here this morning. I've got a couple of chairs we can pick from. So I brought some chairs. We've got this one. I hope everybody can see it. Exhibit A, Bruce. And then I thought of Bruce when I found this chair. Exhibit B, Little Tyke's chair. And so, you know, I would like for y'all to participate. One time I tried this and I asked a question, nobody answered. Nobody raised their hand, nobody said nothing. So we're going to stay here till y'all answer these questions, okay? So, if you were going to pick a chair this morning, which chair would you pick to sit in? Would you pick this chair? Or would you pick this chair? Oh, okay. It looks like that chair went. I kind of thought it might go that way. But see, what happens in life, a lot of time we make judgments based on appearances. It's not really an informed, pick. We're not informed enough about it to make a wise choice. That's how Michelle picked me, was on appearance. I didn't look like this when she picked me. I looked a little different. It might not have been a well-informed pick. I don't know. You have to ask her. So I'm going to share something about these chairs with you. Now, that chair there's a number of years of technology went into building that chair. It's ergonomic. It will hold you up. The engineering went in that chair. And so it's well made. Well, let me tell you something about this chair. This chair, same amount of engineering went into this chair. Same amount of ergonomics. This chair will hold you up. Safety went into this. The exact same thing went into this chair that went into that chair. You can sit in this chair. It'll hold you up. It's not too bad. So now if I asked you, which chair would you pick? Did anybody change their mind? How about this one? How about this one? That's not a very good, convincing argument, was it? Well, I left out one thing. And this is going to be the last thing about the chairs, I promise. I won't mention one more today. What if I told you that this chair, right here, this chair is the chair God made for you to sit in? Not that one. This is the one He personally made for you to sit in. Not that one, this one. Does that make a difference? Come on now, we're in church. It should. Now I'll tell you, that chair, there's a lot of those chairs. That chair is sitting on a wide path. There's lots of chairs on that path. And you can sit in that chair and you're comfortable. You look like everybody else when you sit in this chair. You look comfortable. You kind of blend in. Everything, you can relax. Nobody's looking at you funny because most people are sitting in these chairs. And so it's a popular chair. But you see, when God makes you a chair, it's a little different. When you sit in this chair, you look different, don't you? I don't look the same. I don't make as many noises when I sit in that chair. You stand down a little bit when you sit in this chair. This chair is on a narrow path. There's not a lot of these chairs out there. Not a lot of people sitting in these chairs. In this chair, that sports team that you've been trying to get on, high school, and you've practiced and spent a lot of time, and you think you're good, and you think you're deserving to be on that team, and they pass you by in this chair. It might not have anything to do with your talent. It might be because your parents don't own a company in the town. It might be because you're not connected with the coach or the principal. You're not influential. You're not second in control with Pharaoh. This chair here, if you sit in this chair, that job you've got, you've had it for a long time and there's a position coming open. You filled in for that person that's got that position. So you know you can do the job. You've been at that company a long time, you've got training. But they pass you by in this chair and give it to somebody younger or maybe not as good. See, sometimes it's not about us. It's about God. And sometimes sitting in the chair that He makes for us is difficult. You look different. If you sit in this chair, tried to do a little research this morning, it didn't work out. Well, I think it came to me. I think, Gage, the saying is your crew. I think that's what the kids say. My day, it was our posse. And then some was gang, and then I thought it was your squad. But your crew, when you're young, you got a crew. When you sit in that chair, your crew might not like it. Your crew might vote you off the island because you look different. You represent different things in that chair. And you know, as a follower of Christ, He made that chair for us, but sometimes we choose to sit in that chair. And unfortunately, in my life, I spent a lot of time in that chair instead of this one. You know, sometimes we get out of that chair when things get tough, when they're uncomfortable. And you know, it's easy to get out of that chair because it's not comfortable. And we go to the comfortable chair. And you know, there's things we might not like. So we go to the comfortable chair and we tell everybody else about how it should be. Because we're not in God's chair anymore, we're in our chair. Sometimes we're in that chair and we've got positions or responsibility in the church, and it's tough loving one another. Let me tell you, it's hard for me to love y'all. That was a joke. But it's tough. The best thing about church is people. It's the best thing about church. The worst thing about church is people. The same thing. And sometimes we'll get out of that chair, we got positioned, and it gets tough, and it's hard to talk to people, tough situations. So we get out of that chair, and we get in the comfortable chair, and we pass it on to somebody else. We don't want to deal with that. Folks, we need to look at the story of Joseph. It's not about the blessings. It's not about what we want. It's not about the world. It's about Jesus Christ, God. Keep that in mind as we go through this. And I'm not just preaching to you. Listen, I'm preaching to me. I sat in that chair too long and too many times. But if you're here and you don't know Jesus Christ as your personal Savior and the Lord of your life, you don't have an option. That's your chair. It's the only chair you got is the world one. And in that chair, both chairs have an eternity. And that chair has got an eternity of heat, gnashing of tongues. Just read the book. Go all the way to the right. All the way. It'll tell you about that chair. But you have an option this morning. It's this chair. If you come to know Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, if you have a relationship with Him, if you follow Him, you can sit in this chair. In this chair here, you know, you hear a lot about heaven. There'll be no crying, there'll be no mourning, there'll be no sickness, there'll be no death. Let me tell you what, none of that matters. There's two things about that chair that matters. There'll be no sin. That's where all our trouble is sin. There'll be no sin in your eternity in that chair. And the other thing is you'll get to worship with God your Father for the rest of eternity. So, Ryan, if you're coming up. So this morning, if you don't have a relationship with Him, if you're not for sure, I'd invite you to come down and talk to me or talk to somebody before you leave. And we'll go through the scriptures and we'll talk about it and we'll show you how you can come to know him. And also this morning, I want to encourage us to pray for one another. I say that a lot, but if you're praying for somebody, it's hard to get upset at them. That's why I pray for Michelle a lot. Amen? Listen, we need to lift each other up daily because it's a struggle to walk through this. We're not home. It says right in here, you're not home. So it's a struggle. So this morning, as we all stand, I want to ask you to do something different. What Brother Chris tells you to do. I don't want you to close your eyes and bow your heads this morning. I want all of us to look at these two chairs this morning. Spend a few minutes with God. Now, if God tells you to pray, pray. But look at these two chairs, and I want you to ask yourself this morning, which chair am I sitting in? And why am I sitting in it? And get with God, not only today, but this week. And let's figure out how we can change chairs if we're in the wrong chair. Right?